Good afternoon. Thank you to the good people of Westminster University for joining us for our free speech pilot. Also joining us tonight are Research Director at the Adam Smith Institute, Sam Bowman. Applaud him! My God! Freelance journalist and writer, Shaista Aziz. Young star of UKIP and friend to this programme, Alexandra Swan. And a very funny and highly acclaimed stand-up comedian, Ahir Shah. So, free speech is, of course, your programme, and you can put your points to the panel at home. Just tell Tina Daheley, who's here.
Stu, welcome to Free Speech. You, the audience, are in charge of this panel. Now, you've been voting over the last few weeks to decide what questions we're going to talk about tonight, but now is the time to tell us what you think about what's being said right here. Just use the hashtag FreeSpeechPilot, and I will put your points to our lovely panel.
Thank you, Tina. Let's get started then. Who's got our first question? It's a question about the Sun newspaper. Put your hand up. Yes, what's your name? Naomi, ask away.
Why should page 3 be taken out of the Sun newspaper?
Okay, why shouldn't page 3 be taken out of the Sun newspaper? Let's start with you, please, Shaista.
Well, simply it's sexist, it's outdated, it's been around for so long, the world has changed in such a huge way, and still we buy a newspaper and there you go, bang, page 3, there's a woman there being objectified. It's actually just, I think it's just beyond, more than anything else, just an outdated concept. And I think it needs to go.
So you think it's an outdated concept that needs to go. Would you agree with that, Sam?
I don't really like page 3. I don't read the Sun newspaper, and I think I agree. It does degrade women. But as a consumer, I think I wouldn't buy it because of that. As people talking about the law, as people who don't read the Sun newspaper, I don't think it's our place to say that the private interaction between people who read the Sun, people who run the Sun, and the women who do the modelling shouldn't be allowed to do that if they're all adults and they're all consenting. And I think the final point is that it's very easy to look at the Sun and to say, oh, well, this is degrading to women, but that's kind of an easy way out, because if you look at, say, the Mail Online or anything like that, or kind of women's magazines, they can be just as harmful, and in fact more harmful in terms of body image issues for women. So I don't like restricting people's speech. As a consumer, I probably wouldn't go for it, but I think we should be careful about going for easy solutions instead of a much bigger problem that all society has to address.
Okay, a couple of different opinions there. Who agrees or disagrees with what our panellists are saying? Yes, you better. I'm going to come over. You look like you might have a quiet voice.
I kind of disagree.
I was right.
Because, well, I grew up in newsagents and I saw the Sun every day. And I saw tits when I was like 5, I guess, because it's just open. And I used to read the little bubble that the page 3 girl used to say, and I got a Plato quote from it. But I don't really think she said that. And it kind of makes women look stupid. Women who flash their tits look stupid when women who flash their tits aren't really that stupid.
Why do you think she didn't say it?
I'm not really sure. She was from Coventry, so...
I mean...
I know.
You mean... anyone else? Yes, back here. No? No? Yeah, well, you might as well. Anyone else? Yes.
I think it should be taken down because, like in high school, you see loads of boys looking at it and they're all commenting on it, and it makes girls feel like they can't live up to that standard. And from a young age, girls are like feeling uncomfortable about how they look because of it.
Okay. Alexandra, what's your take on this? Should it be banned?
I don't really think it should be removed. And again, as Sam said, you know, as a consumer, I wouldn't really choose to buy it. I think there's a few aspects just to say, right, we don't really like this. Yes, it's a bit outdated, so let's ban it. You can say that about, you know, all-male golf clubs. You can say it about many things. Doesn't mean they should be banned because no one's being forced to read it. Another thing, I do understand the point about objectifying women, but at the same time, surely it takes a certain type of man to look at, you know, a topless woman and think, right, that's all she is. We should be teaching our children that, you know, people choose to be there, and there are a lot more than, you know, to this woman. She has a family, she probably has a job behind it. On the issue of body image, page 3, yes, it's not ideal, it is a bit outdated, but then we have kids watching hardcore pornography on you know, smartphones. We have far more, like, serious issues in feminism, like pay gap still going on. And then, at least with, like, page 3, it's a natural thing. They're not allowed, they don't have breast implants, you know, they keep one bit. I just think it's not really a massive evil that really needs addressing right now. And on the whole, it's, just you should teach your kids that, yes, there's, that's there, but that's not all there is to someone. You shouldn't judge a page by its model.
Not a bad phrase. Naomi, how would you like to respond? You asked the original question.
My dad's been reading the newspaper for like years now, and he's a Christian man, and I think it's wrong because he's married, and like he comes across it and it's just wrong, and I see him and I don't like it. So yeah.
Does he linger on page 3?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. No, he doesn't. No, he just turns the pages and he just like.
But that's okay then. Yes.
Well, I wouldn't completely agree with banning page 3, outright, but I do think that it's quite problematic that this is a newspaper which is supposed to disseminate the news and not really nude images of women, on the 3rd page as soon as you open the paper. So.
Yeah.
I think really it's just the availability of it. You spoke about pornography, but you have to log on and, it's not readily available. You can go into a newsagent's, flip over one page, and you see a picture of a woman's breast, and it's the availability of it. It's ridiculous comparing it to a men's golf club. It's completely different. It's completely different.
But I think the idea that pornography isn't readily available is also absurd.
Well, it's okay.
If I type in Pornhub, big if.
Yeah, but you can't find that in your newsagents. It's your choice. Yeah, it's your choice to buy the Sun newspaper. But it's if a kid walks over to a newsstand, opens the paper, and sees a picture of a woman's breasts, they didn't really choose to do that. It's pornography. People outrightly type in Pornhub to get pornography. It's the phrase "news, not boobs." You should read the Sun newspaper to have biased right-wing stories, not women's breasts.
You could say that maybe people, adults should just keep, the Sun out of reach of children, and maybe that's down to them, rather than banning it, put it somewhere.
Scandinavian correspondent?
I don't think we should censor our environment. I don't think banning this page would actually solve the problem of how we possess women in this society. If you ban this page, there's going to be another page in another paper, and you're going to see a lot of images. So maybe we should rather focus on solving this problem on an upper scale rather than removing a particular place in a particular magazine.
Sure.
I definitely agree with her in terms of looking at the upper scale and looking at the big picture, but you can start with the small step. And having a naked woman on a newspaper on a daily basis as if, yeah, it's normal, she's just a piece of meat, that is just absolutely degrading. And this kind of message enters our brains on a daily basis, and we look at the effect of this in the long term, women being objectified as just sexual objects. Look at her tits are hanging. That's normal. That's what every woman should do. And unfortunately, that's the message that keeps on developing through the media, through any kind of social media. It's just, nudity and the disrespect for the body is just becoming a norm. And yeah, I just believe it should be banned.
Here, is it disrespect for the body?
I found it quite strange because I was passing through a service station a few days ago, and because I could have get most news online and that now and don't really buy the paper and have never bought The Sun, and I saw like an open newspaper that was open to page 3, and I'd forgotten that page 3 existed, and then saw it again, and the world seemed slightly darker. In that moment, just because, I agree in the sense that I don't feel as though it should be legislated against explicitly, but I just feel as though it would be nice to provide encouragement to these newspapers to stop doing that, because I do think that it sends a very strange message, particularly if the front of a newspaper will be otherwise dominated by things like politics or current events. We have a political class that's largely male-dominated in this country, so at the beginning of a newspaper you will have lots of stories about men who have done something or have achieved, and the most prominent depiction of a woman at the beginning of a newspaper like that will be a kind of naked image of her, which is quite an unsettling thing, I think.
Tim, who says, good to see more women on the panel. I've agreed with everything Shyster's said so far. So on your side, there's a question here for Sam and Alexandra. Why should topless women be in a newspaper? Porn mags are one thing, newspapers another. What's your response to that?
The response is that society doesn't make decisions for adults. The response is that if you believe in free speech, and we're on a show called Free Speech, and you believe that women, adult women, have control and should have control over their bodies, that them doing things that you judge as being irresponsible or bad is not something that you should be able to control. Even if you don't like the Sun newspaper putting women with no top on in it, and I don't really like it either, it's their decision. They're adult women, and I think it's crazy that people say on one hand that they're worried about women being degraded, but on the other hand that we're going to pass laws stopping women from choosing to take their clothes off for money because that's something, because they can't make that judgment for themselves. You have to trust adult women.
Alexandra, do you agree?
Oh God, this is going to sound quite often, well, I agree with Sam on the freedom aspect. As you say, it is free speech, and I don't think legislating against things or banning things tends to be the answer. However, I mean, as you said, it is a consensual transaction here. This is not the BBC, which, national broadcaster putting on a topless woman. Oh, this is. But, the BBC aren't flashing up topless women. It's not, people don't tune in, it's just there. You go out, you choose to buy the Sun chooses to have this, and, the women choose and actually compete to be, to be on page 3. Now, I'm not quite sure why they do it. I can't really understand the motive, but I think it's incredibly patronising to the women involved to almost take that choice away from them. Like, if they choose to put themselves out there, then why should we say, well, no, you're being damaged? It's if anything, just undermining their choice once again.
To be clear, the Sun is the UK's fastest selling newspaper.
Yeah.
This is about money. This newspaper has got a lot of political clout. I don't believe in banning anything. I very passionately believe in freedom of speech. However, I believe that times have changed. And as I said, society is very different now. I think it's fantastic that there's a big campaign. People are campaigning to get the page 3 banned. And I think the newspaper should listen. I think the newspaper needs to hold a debate. And to be honest, I mean, last time I heard the Sun newspaper editor talking about page 3, he said that predominantly women support page 3. Now, I don't believe that to be true, but I do think that there's a difference between buying a magazine that shows women with hardly anything on and then buying a newspaper. I mean, it's only yesterday that Adidas, the world's second biggest sports manufacturer, had to pull a T-shirt that they'd produced for the World Cup in Brazil later on this year, where they had the audacity to put a woman with hardly anything on saying, "Are you looking to score?" Now, the fact of the matter is, women are objectified, and this is a fact, and it happens across the world. It happens in our country as well. And I just think that in 2014, it's unacceptable to think that it's all right to have this type of thing in a newspaper. I mean, what I find amusing is the Sun's got coupons for half-term holidays to Legoland and Madame Tussauds, and then they've got page 3, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
Go on, Sam.
It kind of sounds like, you know that saying, you can have any color car you want so long as it's black. It's kind of like you're saying you can do anything you want so long as I approve of it.
No, that's not
It's
what I'm
well, you
saying.
are, because you said
No,
I don't
I
believe
know
in
what
things
I'm
being
saying.
banned. You said I don't believe in things being banned, and then a couple of seconds later you said I think page 3 should be banned.
I did not say that. I said that I believe that it shouldn't be there, but the reasons why I believe it shouldn't, I don't believe that there should be a political ban on page 3. I believe that this is an outdated concept and it needs to go, and I think that a lot of people feel very passionately about it, and I understand why they do. I don't think there needs to be legislation to ban it. I just think the newspaper should say, okay, it's 2014 now, this is an old, outdated concept, we don't need it anymore.
Yes, I guess there's a difference between a law coming in
Yeah.
and the paper choosing to take it off.
Yeah.
Page 3. Just out of interest to sort of summarise this, and actually one more thing. If Adidas had done an equal run of T-shirts with a picture of a scantily clad man that also said, "Are you looking to score?" would that be acceptable?
No, it wouldn't. This is the World Cup. The World Cup is one of the world's biggest sporting events. It's for everyone. The reason why I brought the Adidas thing up is because this is to do with companies and how they view women. I mean, I find it staggering.
What I'm saying, if they'd done exactly the same for men as well.
No, because what's that got to do with sport? How is that linked to sport? I don't understand.
I don't think it's for us to decide what's linked to sport or what isn't, or what's appropriate and what isn't. I think it'd be absolutely fine if you have scantily clad, attractive men there as well. Sex sells, this is a business. Football is, to be honest, most sport is actually business. It's not really actually about the sport these days, is it? And I mean, genuinely, as long as there's, men there as well, how can that possibly be denigrating to women specifically? There's something for everyone.
It's degrading to women to have a T-shirt that says, would you want to score?
Not if there's one
That's
for
the
men
only
as well.
So you don't think there's a problem with
If
that?
there's both, if it's, you know, if it's, if they,
As long as it's equal
yeah, if
opportunities.
it's equal
So why
opportunities.
do you think they pulled? So why do you think they pulled the T-shirt?
Because there was only women. And because there was
But beyond
outcry.
that, why do you think they pulled it?
Well, as I say, because it was just women, therefore, yes, okay, it's objectifying women. If you're objectifying men, women, not children, then, yeah.
There's something in the fact that, I mean, there is also the fact that an equivalent T-shirt with a man on it presumably was not produced. Like, so that T-shirt doesn't exist. So what we're essentially saying...
I would have been all over that.
Well, so the notion is that the sexual objectification of women can be commercialized, whereas the sexual objectification of a man can't be commercialized, and that is in and of itself a very troubling thing.
What about Toss of the Week and Heat magazine and things like that?
I have no idea what that is.
Well, let me show you. The quick show of hands, who is in favour of page 3? In favour of? Yeah, not many. And against? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay, let's move on to the next question then. This is about university fees. Who's got it? Hand up. Yes, please, go on.
University fees are fair. Should we introduce a retroactive tax on all those MPs who got their education for free?
So if university fees are fair, should we introduce a retroactive tax on people who didn't pay for their education in the past? I'm not keen on it. But yeah.
Hang on, are we just talking about MPs specifically, or everyone that's had a free education? Because, come on, that's like saying, oh, you know, next, let's pick on the bankers next, because that's always popular. You know, I think, whilst tertiary education, it would be great if university fees were free, or if there weren't any, they're not. At the moment, people actually do pay back less per month than they would under the old scheme. I mean, I'm doing another postgrad course at the moment. I have to pay fees. It sucks. It's awful. No one wants to come out with debt. But if you want to invest in your future, well, to be honest, I think it should be the people who are going to university actually paying more of their fees than someone, you know, working on minimum wage. Their tax is going towards subsidising fees. I'm sorry, I just think it's fair.
Could I just pick up on an element of what you said? Do you regard university education as an economic investment in your future rather than something that would be beneficial for other reasons that aren't solely economic?
I think there are both. I mean, I think a lot of education should be for the sake of, you know, of personal growth and all that, hence philosophy degrees, which I did. But of course, you know, there's two aspects. There's always economics in everything these days.
And you mentioned paying less a month now, but you're just paying it for longer.
But if you earn above 21,000, you don't pay anything at all.
Then I'd hope to earn more than that because I've gone to university.
You would, but a lot of people don't. So.
Okay. Sam.
BBC wages.
On the question, I think the interesting question here is, are university fees fair? And what I think we want from a fee structure is something that allows people from poorer backgrounds and middle-income backgrounds to get into university, but does not subsidise people from rich families. So after they tripled tuition fees to £9,000, people from the top two income groups, so the first and second highest income groups, went to university a bit less. People from the bottom three, they continued to rise along trend. So what's happened is really people who have really good options because their daddy's business can give them a nice step on the ladder are going to university less, whereas people who need to go to university to get that foot on the ladder are still going to university. That I do think is a fair system, and I agree with Alexandra that I don't think university should be free. I don't, because free just means somebody else is paying for you. And if you make university free, then ultimately what's happening is people who haven't gone to university are paying for people to go to university and to make that extra money in the rest of their life. Yeah, university is about more than just making money, but money is an important aspect of it. And if we do subsidise the rich to go to university, I think we need to change that.
Yes.
With low income, you do have the facilities available in terms of grants which you do not need to pay back. So I think we are just poking at a dead horse, so to speak. I think there's methods in place, there's loans, there's grants that can be paid off. They're not exactly a Wonga loan, and it's not a Wonga loan, and there are facilities in place. So I don't think university fees are expensive. They are expensive on relative compared to 30 years ago, but the facilities are there to make it more aware that we are not paying so much, but yet we are. But you have to weigh up the two sides of it. I think the facilities are there available.
Yes, this lady here.
Used to pay £3,000. The same facilities were being provided when you were paying £3,000, except it's just changed now. And we're going to be leaving university with more debt. So, same facilities were being provided when you were paying £3,000. So.
Go on. Yeah. So from that, I think I agree with you. I agree. Even my dad told me he paid £300, and that was the whole university for the year. That was 4 years ago. But university has become more of a business. That's what university has become. It's become a money-making scheme, and that's what university is. We may have an education, but it is about making money. That's what university has become in a modern-day society.
It's making money, but you're also leaving with a degree. So you, as an individual,
You two swap numbers.
Come in to Sam. Education raises the quality of the future workforce. Surely that's worth the country investing in. This has come in from Karen, who says university fees aren't proportionate to what you can earn when you graduate, so you don't always get high-paid jobs. And this one for you, Shaista. If you keep pricing young people out of university, who do you think will hold the good jobs in future?
Already. I mean, the fact of the matter is we have a class structure in this country and it's deeply embedded in the system. And this is one of the most class-dominated countries in the whole world. And that still is a fact. So while I believe that it is pretty impossible to have a free university system, when I was doing my first degree, I paid my student fees back then. But I think I go back to what the gentleman in the audience said, which is about the value that you're getting from, or I think it may be you, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you made this point, but about the value that's, what are you getting? Are you getting value for money? Because I do think a lot of universities now are structured to run like a business. We have much higher numbers of overseas students coming to study here, and that is about money. That's because the universities can extract much higher student fees from those students. So I do think there needs to be an examination of what kind of value students are getting for their education. And I do also believe that we need to ensure that people from across the board are getting access to university education. It is a fact that there's now, if you graduate, you're going to be in much higher levels of debt, and your chances of getting a very well-paid job are not as high as they once were. So I think we need to look at all those different things.
Sure. Julia.
Please. Okay, so I have an issue in the fact that I think it's inevitable the fees are going to continue to increase. I think we're heading towards the American system, where parents are going to have to start saving up once their child is born in order to fund education. But actually, and I think the big problem with that is that the students are taking on the debt themselves. So what would people think of introducing a new system where actually the amount of money you pay for fees is actually tax deductible? So if your parents fund you through university, or your guardians fund you through university, and we're talking about when it gets to the point where it's £25,000 a year for fees, that income is tax deductible. They don't have to pay tax on that amount of money. And that way, you make it accessible to everybody. And actually, I disagree with the points that are being made about not being able to get a job. I know that the current market is really competitive, but I still think you're at an advantage if you go to university. You're still going to get proportionally a better job, and you are going to be able to pay off that loan. And actually, it's the best kind of debt to have in one sense, because everyone's going to have it. So, in a sense, as that increase in fees will gradually keep going, because it will, let's face it, why don't we switch the system so the students aren't carrying the debt, actually it's just tax deductible for their parents?
Okay. Is that a good system here?
There's something quite defeatist in the attitude that it's going to inevitably increase to the stage where we're going to reach an American system, which would be quite upsetting. And also, when you say it's the kind of best kind of debt to have because everyone's going to have it, well, everyone isn't going to have it unless absolutely everyone goes to university, in which case you just get qualification inflation and you have to have a master's or you have to have a doctorate in order to replace what you could have got with an earlier level in the past. But I think that there's something generally quite troubling about the shift in what education is seen to be for, in some sense, because as you say, it is a gigantic export in this country. University education is a huge export because you can charge substantially more. I remember when I went to university, my fees were £3,000 a year. When I got the letter back from Student Finance at the end of my time telling me I owed them about 20 grand, that's the first time I've openly laughed at the Post. Stand-up comedy is not well paid. That's at least not my kind. But I think that there's just something quite generally troubling about the notion that when you're applying to university as an 18-year-old now, you're forced to take on this really complex financial consideration for the rest of your life, right? Like, am I going to be getting my value for money? And that's a good thing. You should want value for money. But is this going to be value for money? Am I going to get my money's worth for this? Is this going to net me the best possible job that I can get? Is it going to increase my future income potential? And that's kind of moving a world away from the notion that education might be something that's valuable in and of itself, and that society in general might look at an educated populace as something that's worth having as an end in itself, which would be more of a system where we did have free at the point of delivery tertiary education, or at least one that wasn't out of the reach of many people. I feel as though I might not have gone to university if it were much more expensive, and I think that would have been a real shame.
Yes, you've been very patient.
The thing I'd say is that the new fees force a basic cost-benefit analysis. It forces you to say, is it worth going to do a basket weaving degree for 3 years, waste 20, 30 grand, and then not have anything out of it, or should I go to try and get to a good university, do a good degree, or should I go into the workforce? Because it is true that there are people who go to university for drinking, partying, and not really having much to do. That is true. I know people who do that. But whereas with £9,000 fees, you sort of got to think, well, is it worth my time? Is it worth my money?
But surely that's a slope whereby you can eventually just get to the point where, like, how much can we possibly bleed a person until they'll say it's no longer worth my money, right? And so the extension of your proposal presumably would be to just find breaking point.
I think he's absolutely right, because when you were saying it really forces this really tough decision, I was nodding my head, great, that's what we want people to do. Going into university should be a tough decision, and people should think about it, because somebody's going to pay that cost. And whether it's the student themselves, who presumably is going to earn more, that's what you'd hope anyway, or people who haven't gone to university. If you have universally free education for anybody who goes to university, who ends up actually paying for that are the people who didn't go to university because they don't get anything. So that's the question we have to ask.
Or if you're assuming
who
that
pays?
all graduates will, in general, earn more than they will pay higher rates.
If that's the case, then the loan system should be exactly what you want.
But I just think that a movement in general towards an idea of university where the idea of tertiary education in and of itself is thought of as a major financial consideration, and that should be the greatest consideration in one's mind, I have no better way of phrasing it than it being a shame.
It's a shame if you go. If you don't go, you maybe don't want to pay for somebody else to spend 3 years drinking. I mean, I enjoyed drinking for 3 years in university. It was good. I didn't learn much. I drank a lot, and maybe that was good. But I'm not happy with the idea that we should be poor people who are from the bottom of society should be paying for people from the middle class and up to go to university in that way.
I completely agree as well. I did my undergraduate at Exeter, which is a wonderful, wonderful university, but all I did was drink and play sports for 3 years, and so did most of my friends there. And a lot of them, were from private school, Surrey background. It's that sort of, a lot of people at that university are that demographic. And there is something a little bit unsavoury about the fact that while it's paying £3,000 a year, so how much, there's no such thing as a free lunch, the rest wasn't free and subsidised, it's taxpayers paying that. There's no such thing as government money, there's a tax of individuals. So there's people who perhaps haven't been to, who haven't been to university, funding this brilliant 3 years of doing grille aside playing lacrosse and drinking, and that's just not really right, is it?
Yeah, there seems to be an air of an entitlement here with people going to university, as if education for people in our country is something that's needed or something that we deserve intrinsically. What we have to remember is that, one, there are a lot of people who don't go to university who can move up in a company. You don't have to go to university to be a skilled person. Two, we also need to remember that we're all paying a loan, and I'm not sure, someone might be able to shed some light on this, that Student Finance England, I'm not sure that's a government company. Is it? It's private. It's a private company and we pay commercial interest on those loans. It is all about money. We don't deserve to go to university intrinsically. We're all in a situation where some of us had a better education, we get better A-levels, and we're able to go.
Tina, say what you were going to say about the student loans company, please, because I enjoyed it yesterday.
Student loans?
Student loans company.
Right, so I have been paying back my student loan for what feels like forever, and I suddenly thought to myself, hang on a minute, I've been paying this off for years. Surely I've paid it off by now. Turns out I had paid it off 3 years ago. So I had been overpaying, nothing I could do about it because it comes out of your pay packet every month. And then the onus was on me to prove that I'd overpaid. So I had to then get my pay slips for however long and then it took about 6 months until I got in contact with the managing director of the company, and then it was transferred to my bank account on the same day. That's my story, but that's another show.
Student Loans Company. That's what we're going to do. Yes.
Hi, I'm coming from a country of free education, and something that surprised me when I arrived to Britain this September was how these people in this country seem to hate tax. So how they seem to see it as such a bad thing. Would you not pay tax, even if you would not have kids, to support such value as education? Would you see it as such a bad thing? A second point is that this system is built up on debt. It's going to be proven that not everyone is going to pay this loan back, and the government is the one losing at the end of the day. Thank you.
Yeah, that's no problem. Anyone? Oh, yes, back to my man.
I said the only point I was trying to make was university should be for the educational elite. It should be for those who are intelligent enough to go, not for everybody. It's not a universal right. It should be for those who are going to be captains of industry, future leaders, people who are going to set policy and set the country. It shouldn't be that everybody goes because it's not a right. It should. If you haven't got the brains to go to university, you should go and do the work. It shouldn't be that everybody goes just because it's what you do. It's not formal compulsory education, it's tertiary education.
Okay, but going to university is not necessarily about how brainy you are. This is a fact. If you've been raised in a household where your father, your mother went to university, everybody went to university, you're very likely to go to university. If you've been raised in a family where no one's been to college, no one's been to university, your aspirations are going to be very different. You're talking about educating future leaders. If you want to really capture the people's talent in this country, it should be that you do have access to education. And actually, education is a universal human right. Yes, it is. Of course it is.
Education.
Education, everybody has a right to an education.
Yes, but not tertiary.
A couple of the panelists have been making the point of that why should we pay for somebody else's university education fees? But then the same point also applies to different matters like military, war, and all of that. Why should somebody else pay for a war that they disagree with? So it goes into that point that, well, which is more benefit? Which benefits society more?
I don't want the money to go on war either, but the question isn't why should we pay, it's why should the cleaners here pay for your education? That's the question. And I think that you should be paying for your own. But you did hit on an important question, because we keep talking about education as if it's this one big homogenous lump. It's not. If we have a certain amount of money to spend on education, and if we decide that education is a good investment for society or the government to make, we should be spending that money on early years care, on primary school for everybody, because every study that you look at shows that subsidizing university benefits the middle class and the upper class. If you want to help the poor, if you want to help them in their achievements in life, you need to invest in primary school education, secondary school education, and childcare. That's where the money should be going. And it's not a question of, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's, what else could we be spending this money on?
Yeah. I'm hearing so much about university being drinking and all the fun, and the gentleman there who said it's for people with brains and whatnot. But what happened to viewing university as a nourishing experience? What happened to going to university, even if you haven't got the grades at A-levels, what happened to just, finding the luck and going to university and starting fresh again, regardless of what background you come from, regardless of how privileged you are, regardless of how clever you are, or how many long words you can use or whatever. Like, we just need to view university from the way that it's a nourishing experience and that it's a fresh start for somebody. And the 3 years that they spend in whatever degree they end up with, it could play for to their own benefit.
I liked that, but I don't know what nourishing means.
For someone else's nourishing experience.
I hear?
Several things. Firstly, I would like to heavily dispute the notion that it's impossible to have 3 years of your life where you are both drinking heavily and being intellectually nourished. I managed it. It's like, you can do it. You can drink lots of beer and still read quite some books. So don't worry about that. There's also, there's this idea of subsidizing other people's kind of things, and I think that this gentleman was onto something there, where there are all sorts of things in society that a taxpayer will subsidize that they do not directly, like childless people will pay tax, and that will go on schools and stuff that they're never going to see the benefit of in a direct sense, but obviously there are lots of indirect benefits to these things. So the idea that a person can be paying towards something and just because that they don't use it, they'll see no benefit out of it is ridiculous. Also, I was always quite concerned by this point where you're saying that kind of the poorest people in society are paying forward money that's going to be used in order to educate the kind of richer and the middle classes who will then go on to get the better jobs and stuff. But I don't really understand that, because surely if we have a kind of system of progressive taxation, at least in some cases, and you're claiming that graduates will be disproportionately wealthier to begin with and then be made even wealthier by their university experience, surely they will be paying more tax. Therefore, the share that's actually being paid by the poorest of that is quite slim, as it is with all other things, if you have progressive taxation.
Complicated. And so basically the extra money that they make isn't very well targeted by the taxes that we have. If you had something like a graduate tax, then that would do that. Actually, the loan system that we have is essentially a graduate tax. So the loan system that we have isn't really a loan system. It's not really a private company because it's so strongly regulated and subsidized by the government. It's basically backed by the government because they're forced to offer much well below market rate loans. If you pay, as Alexandra said, if you earn less than a certain amount, you don't pay any loan back at all. And if you have debt outstanding after, I think it's 55, that debt disappears. So that actually is the best debt you could possibly have, because it's not real debt. It's more like a graduate tax. So that is basically what we have right now. If we went to a system where you had universal free coverage, you'd have a very poorly targeted system, and you would end up with poor people's taxes going to the welfare or the education of the middle class. I think that you're right. There are lots of things that we decide that even though you don't benefit from it, you pay for others. What I object to is when that is a wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. Those are the things that we should be fighting against, and I'm glad that the system right now doesn't do that.
Okay.
Hiya. Sorry, my mind's gone a bit blank. So the question I think should be, do we actually go to university in order to get a job that pays more, or to actually learn more? Is it a kind of institute which is, it's just the value is on monetary sense, or are we actually going to actually expand our knowledge?
By a show of hands, who came to university because they thought it meant that they would earn more ultimately? So most of you. And who came just to learn? Utopian. Utopian.
I think, yeah, exactly. And I think it's really sad how a lot of students are very passive in the sense, like, for example, when there's an exam coming up, rather than saying, how much can we learn more, it's what do I need to know for that exam? So I think that's quite sad.
Yeah.
To be honest, like, having paid the $3,000 a year thing and having to pay that back, like, I don't particularly object to the fact that I have had to do that. Like, that seems like a fairly, like, I feel as though I got value for money, in inverted commas. But I just think that if, as this lady up here said, we are destined on an inevitable upward spiral of rising costs, I feel as though it would be better if we didn't think about it in that way. I would rather think about education in a different way, which I feel would be better achieved if it weren't prohibitively expensive.
Ideally, we would have a system where you go back to the old Oxbridge, and this for all universities, where you have small tutor groups and you have lots of contact hours, and it actually is about extending your mind and education for the sake of sort of bettering yourself, bettering your mind. Unfortunately, because a whole mixture of things between the cost of university education, because of the commercialisation of it all, because of globalisation. Now it actually all does quite depressingly come down to what you're going to be worth and what they're investing and all of that, and it's quite sad, really. I mean,
of love online. Jake says, you're the only person talking sense on the panel. Some really great points being made. This one's come in from someone with no name that says, everyone won't have the debt like someone in the audience said. Rich kids' parents will pay it. Poor kids miss out. Is the rise in uni fees actually a good thing if it means kids growing up looking into alternative careers? And then Sam, these are a couple of points that come in for you. Your point of use argument is rubbish. Should non-taxpayers not be allowed to access the NHS then?
Well, no, because that would be a transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor. I'm very comfortable with transferring wealth from rich people to poor people. What I don't like is when we're transferring wealth from poor people to rich people. That seems unjust to me, and I think most people would agree.
Sam is a basic Robin Hood figure. Yes.
University would be free for the poorest individuals, we wouldn't be having the tax money going on the people who can afford to pay their university fees. It wouldn't be. If there was, the system that is needed is for the people who can't afford to go to university and will get themselves into over like £30,000 worth of debt not just on university fees, on how much it costs them to live. Like, I don't understand, your argument makes no sense to me, basically.
So the argument is not that poor people who go to university are paying the extra tax. It's people who don't go to university at all. So even if you make university free, completely free for poor people to go to university, it's the ones who haven't gone to university that are ending up paying for them. And we know that. I mean, there have been lots and lots of studies done that show that if you go to university, the earnings that you have throughout your life are much, much increased, and more than enough to pay these loans. But I think the point we need to remember is what I said at the beginning. The data is very clear. Poor people have not been put off going to university. There are more of them going to university now than there were before the fees were introduced and before they were raised. The people who are going to university less are people from the upper two income groups. They're being put off because they have other options. That's exactly what we want. They've taken that hard decision. They've thought about it really hard and they thought, no, I've got a better option. Great. So that we're not subsidizing them anymore, and that's something that I think is a real endorsement of the system we have now.
I have a question. Think about it from another aspect. You're paying 9,000 now, or let's say 30,000 pounds, and then you're going to grow up, you're going to have kids, they're going to go to uni, you're going to pay 30,000 for them. Would you rather pay £5 a month, or £10 a month, or even £100 a month to invest that money in tax paying and getting free education, and knowing that it's not only going to be your kids, it's going to be your kids' friends who are also going to go to uni? Or you want to pay this now, be in debt yourself, having your kids in debt, and having their kids in debt? Would you think that in long-term run, this system is going to be better? And also, another point, what does this do to our mentality? We go to uni, as someone was saying, it's becoming a business now, it's modern to make it a business. Well, that makes us apathetic. We go to uni, we're like, well, I paid 30,000, I deserve my degree, I paid for it. I go to McDonald's, I buy a cheeseburger, I get it, it's value for money. We don't value for it for the knowledge of it, it's become a product. And I think there's seriously something wrong in this mentality.
Here?
Is the idea of tertiary education one that confers only individual benefit or one that confers a social benefit, I guess, is a question that needs to be...
That's the other question. Compared to what? So if the money could go to something like childcare or early years care, and that gave us a much, much bigger benefit, especially benefit for the poor, wouldn't that be a better investment for the money? But given that we have limited resources in the world, where should we direct the resources is the question, not wouldn't it be nice if everything was free?
Yeah, I know. It's general, wouldn't it be nice if things were nicer? But I suppose there's all sorts of things that you could then say, oh, well, I don't particularly like the extent of the defence budget, so why can't we cut that, or why not really
And that's a
try
great argument. We should be saying that. That's exactly what we should be saying.
Well, and why don't we invest that in other places? But yes, I just agree with people who've been saying that it is beneficial in a wider sense and should be valued on the basis of wisdom and things like that, rather than just I will be able to get a good job that I will sit in from 9 to 5 until I die.
Last couple of quick points.
Sam mentioned that a lot of rich people aren't going to university anymore. Would you consider that that might be due to the fact that they already have good connections and therefore don't have to go to university?
I think he said exactly that. Yes.
Also, you go to university to have a better future, so you go there to learn and enrich yourself. Mostly you go there to have a better future. We're talking about going to university as an ambition to have security in the future. What happens now is that you go to university, you do your undergrad, you do your postgrad. Is there security of getting a job? No. So what's the point? There's no security. You end up paying debt for your school. Do you have a chance of getting a mortgage for the future? So it's all a vicious cycle, and it's just becoming pointless.
It's a fairly upbeat place to end, I think. Please, round of applause for all of our panellists here, Alexandra, Sam and Shyster. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. It's been a great debate.
Thank